So my work for the past few years has really focused on subterranean spaces, interiority of human bodies, and the connections between. I think that stemmed from honestly being around sickness and disease a lot as a young child, a lot of like internal mutation, and I guess me as a child just trying to figure out what was going on underneath the surface, something that is kind of withering away at someone, but is kind of invisible to the eye. Of course, with sickness sometimes also comes death, and I think the idea of burial and the connection between burial and subterranean really resonated with me. Burial of bodies, the idea of religious institutions and belief systems, like how do those affect how we view the body, the interiority of the body, and how we interpret land, specifically through the act of burial processes, or what's happening underground and how we relate to those spaces. Last year in 2022, I did a residency at the Santa Fe Art Institute, and it was my first time coming to the Southwest. I had never really considered subterranean spaces outside of New York, so it was a super foreign experience to me. Thinking about landscape, not only the vastness of the vista, if you will, but also the verticality of landscape, and how I thought about what was happening below my feet, and how in this part of the country that is monetized. It's part of the economic system of the place. That was new for me, and that led me on this investigation of what that means to relate to subterranean spaces in a completely different way. When I first got to the Santa Fe Art Institute, I was really thinking about the mythos of the American landscape, or this idea of moving westward, or what westward expansion meant, or in this idea of like the promised land being west, where someone would go and find anew, and that this land was gifted, by God for the people to use. So coming in, I was really excited to go out into the desert landscapes and explore and just take photos and take videos and be in this place. And it was quite jarring when I did go to these places as a 30-something woman from New York. I felt the vulnerability of my person in a way that I was not expecting. The weather was harsh, the landscape, the dryness, the fact that the trees were so short, it was like there was nowhere to hide. You were always exposed. And I think that exposure to both elements and also, whatever else may be of harm out there, I really felt like physically in my body. And I think that really preempted this idea of embodiment in the Southwest, and was completely contrary to all of the intellectual understanding I had of the West. It wasn't until a month or so after I left Santa Fe, I came to be artist in residence at the Museum of the Southwest, and it really changed the way I was thinking about land. I had visited Monaghan's Sandhills State Park, which, if no one has been there, everyone needs to go. It's an incredible place. I spent a lot of time there just walking through essentially these giant sand dunes that go on for miles, and just really thinking about deep time, geologic earth, and again, this verticality of space and land and subterranean, what's happening beneath my feet, and how important that economy is to the people of the area and just wider. The way I started to investigate that relationship was through my interest in the Midland discovery. So the Midland discovery was in 1953. There was a Pleistocene human that was discovered in Monaghan Sandhills State Park that was originally thought to be a man. So they found this body, these remains from, I think it was like 9,000 BC or so. And it was really interesting because he became known as the Midland Man, and it was this celebrated kind of discovery of this, this archaeological dig or whatnot. But then the conversation changed pretty drastically when they found out that the Midland Man was a woman. So instead of the Midland Man, they named her now the Midland Minnie, which I found to be really interesting, because why are we naming someone now that they are a woman, but this person had retained their agency as a man? Also, the name Minnie, it's not a full name, it's often used as a nickname. It was 1953, so Disney was already a thing. So we're then thinking about this name of Minnie as like a cartoon. It's really kind of demeaning in a way to this person that was discovered. So that really got me thinking about not only subterranean space and discovery or disruption of land, but also the role and the hierarchy of gender in this part of the country. So I went to Carlsbad Caverns during my first residency stay at the Museum of the Southwest as a way to actually embody or feel the physical space of subterranean. It was absolutely amazing. There was this quiet power that I felt underground, and the aesthetic that I chose to take from that experience also plays into the title of the show, thinking about this idea of SHEOL, which is the Hebrew word for abode of the dead. And this is pre-heaven and hell. So SHEOL is essentially this catch-all for the dead, body and soul. So in this space, I wanted to create some type of sacred or like ritualistic space where it existed outside of just a museum space or museum gallery. I really like to play with installation as a way of asking the viewer or the audience to like play into a different environment. And so through this idea of ritualistic space or sacred space, I could have easily, I think, gone with a nave or an altar and like really creating, again, this like controlled space where you're seeing something at the front or the foreground, and it creates a hierarchy for me. So I wanted the work to take on more of like a pagan ritual space where it felt more cyclical, rounder, and the important elements were towards the center, and then essentially feeling like the audience is then pulled towards the center of the space. The site of the work, this gallery space itself, was super important in creating the work because of this recessed light that we have. And that, for me, it felt like there was this kind of pulling or vacuous like feeling coming up and like towards the ceiling. So I wanted the work to all kind of feel like it was being pulled inward and upward in the space. So I have a central sculpture, or I like to say central figure, suspended from the center of the space. And then I have 6 kind of pillar-like shapes, which again reference the my experience in Carlsbad Caverns, but also reference the pillars of SHEOL and how that space was essentially this cavernous, dark, hollow space. For the work, I created these large organic sculptures and then felt the need to have a smaller, more fragile, also harder component. So I drew from my Catholic traditional upbringing, and created these abstracted drill bit holy oil chrisms. So essentially I'm taking this like positive, hard, or aggressive object that is doing this kind of violation or excavation into earth and turn that into the vessel. So holy oil, of course, I'm thinking about the economy of the Southwest, specifically in Midland, and using this visual cue of Catholicism to kind of bridge the two together and really question, what is holy, what is belief, and what kind of reigns supreme in this region of the country. My intention with my work is for others to ask questions. I'm not trying to prove a point or even show a point or have any answers with the work that I'm making. I lead with my investigations of ideas, and I don't think that an investigation has ended even though the work is up. It's still continuing on. It's still me questioning these ideas and putting them together. So for me, I would measure success of my work for just the fact of having others asking those questions, or even if they're not the same questions, if there are any questions. I think people need to be critical of the world around them in all capacities. So if I'm able to get someone to question something about themselves, about their community, about how they respond to environmental concerns or economic concerns, or how or why they believe what they believe, that's what makes it worthwhile for me. If you're in one space for too long, you don't relate to your body in the same way anymore. Everything becomes super familiar. Your community becomes familiar. The roads you drive become familiar. You become really, it's like the automaton situation. But when you're in a new place, you're forced to be more observant and be present. And I think that is the essence of making work about a place, is to really be able to look at a place with fresh eyes, like you've never seen it before, without any preconceived notions of the place, because I thought that I knew what I was coming into when I came to the Southwest, and it was completely different. And I think once I dropped those ideas, then I was able to really absorb and process and then put back out a point of view. My name is Ruiz, and this is my installation, SHEOL.